الله نسألك الجنة نعوذ بك من النار أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا كريم الذين آمنوا وتطمئن قلوبهم بذكر الله لا بذكر الله تطمئن القلوب أفضل ذكر فاعلم أنه لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله لا إله إلا 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 الله 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 Allah, 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 la ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, la ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, la ilaha illallah. سيدنا محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وصحبه وسلم إلى حضرة النبي سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وصحبه وسلم الفاتحة والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته شهر مبارك Inshallah, Yom Mubarak. Alhamdulillah. Nice to see everyone. Inshallah, we got brothers from the DR. Allah bless everyone. So we normally do the Essentials of Islam, Iman and Ihsan class, which is commentary from Habib Ahmed bin Zayn al-Habashi's Risala, al-Jamia, his comprehensive treatise. We normally do that Saturday after Dhuhr. Because of the Ramadan schedule, we moved it to after Fajr. So we're covering that after we do our adhkar this morning, inshallah ta'ala. First, we'll be doing adhkar from the handout that there is a link to. We just read the formula of La ilaha illallah from that. And now we'll be reading invocations after the Fajr prayer, which will be on page 133 if you're reading Arabic from that handout. And 134 if you're reading from the transliteration. And I think you'll be on 134. Bilal, I think you'll start Arabic on 134. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألف لام ميم ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون والذين أنزل إليك وما أنزل من قبلك وبالآخرة هم يوقنون أولئك على هدى من ربهم وأولئك هم المفلحون وإلهكم إله واحد لا إله إلا هو الرحمن الرحيم اللهم إني أقدم إليك بين يدي كل نفس ولمحة ولحظة وخطرة وطرفة يطرف بها أهل السماوات والأرض وكل شيء وفي علمك كائن أو قد كان أقدم إليك بين يدي ذلك كله الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض ولا يؤوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وإن تبدوا ما في أنفسكم أو تخفوه يحاسبكم به الله فيغفر لمن يشاء ويعذب من يشاء والله على كل شيء قدير آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كلنا آمن بالله وملائكته وكتبه ورسله لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين آمين شهد الله أنه لا إله إلا هو والملائكة وأولو العلم قائما بالقسط لا إله إلا هو العزيز الحكيم وأنا أشهد بما شهد الله به أشهد الله على ذلك واستودع الله هذه الشهادة وهي لي عند الله وديعة أسأله حفظها حتى يتوفاني عليها إن الدين عند الله الإسلام قل اللهم مالك الملك اللهم مالك الملك تؤتي الملك من تشاء وتنزع الملك ممن تشاء وتعز من تشاء وتذل من تشاء بيدك الخير إنك على كل شيء قدير تولج الليل في النهار وتولج النهار في الليل وتخرج الحي من الميت وتخرج الميت من الحي وترزق من تشاء بغير حساب رحمن الدنيا والآخرة ورحمهما تؤتي من تشاء منهما وتمنع من تشاء أنت ترحمنا فارحمنا رحمة تغنينا بها رحمة من سواك اللهم اقضي عنا الدين وأغننا من الفقر وتوفنا بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. اللهم إنك عفو عفو فاعف عنا. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا كريم. You're doing the word of Sayyidina Sheikh Abu Bakr bin Salim. It's on page 145 in this handout, the Arabic, and the transliteration is the next page. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم يا عظيم السلطان يا قديم الإحسان يا دائم النعم يا كثير الجود يا واسع العطاء يا خفي اللطف يا جميل الصنع يا حليم لا يعجب. صل يا ربي على سيدنا محمد وآله وسلم وارض عن صحابته أجمعين. اللهم لك الحمد شكرا ولك المن فضلا وأنت ربنا حقا ونحن عبيدك رقا وأنت لم تزل ذلك أهلا. يا ميسر كل عسير ويا جابر كل كسير ويا صاحب كل فريد ويا مغني كل فقير ويا مقوي كل ضعيف ويا مأمن كل مخيف. يسر علينا كل أسير فتيسير الأسير إليك يسير. اللهم يا من لا يحتاج إلى البيان والتفسير حاجاتنا كثير وأنت عالم بهذا خبير. اللهم إني أخاف منك وأخاف ممن يخاف منك وأخاف ممن لا يخاف منك. اللهم بحق من يخاف منك نجنا ممن لا يخاف منك. اللهم بحق سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم احرسنا بعينك التي لا تنام واكنفنا بكنفك الذي لا يرام وارحمنا بقدرتك علينا فلا نهلك وأنت ثقتنا ورجاؤنا. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. اللهم إنا نسألك زيادة في الدين وبركة في العمر وصحة في الجسد وسعة في الرزق وتوبة قبل الموت وشهادة عند الموت ومغفرة بعد الموت وعفوا عند الحساب وأمانا من العذاب ونصيبا من الجنة وارزقنا النظر إلى وجهك الكريم. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. حضرة النبي سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وصحبه وسلم. الفاتحة. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا كريم. We're doing Al-Wird Al-Latif about Imam Al-Haddad. Just keep scrolling. It'll be page 151 and the following page will be transliteration. Inshallah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس ربي أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك ربي يحضرون ربي أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك ربي يحضرون ربي أعوذ بك من همزات الشياطين وأعوذ بك ربي يحضرون أفحسبتم أنما خلقناكم عبثا وأنكم إلينا لا ترجعون فتعالى الله الملك الحق لا إله إلا هو رب العرش الكريم ومن يدعو مع الله إلها آخر لا برهان له به فإنما حسابه عند ربه إنه لا يفلح الكافرون وقل رب اغفر وارحم أنت خير الراحمين فسبحان الله حين تمسون وحين تصبحون وله الحمد في السماوات والأرض وعشيا وحين تظهرون يخرج الحي من الميت ويخرج الميت من الحي ويحيي الأرض بعد موتها وكذلك تخرجون أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله وتلك الأمثال نضربها للناس لعلهم يتفكرون هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله عما يشركون هو الله خالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم سلام على نوح في العالمين إنا كذلك نجزي المحسنين إنه من عبادنا المؤمنين أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم. بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض ولا في السماء وهو السميع العليم. بسم الله الذي لا يضر مع اسمه شيء في الأرض في السماء وهو السميع العليم. اللهم إني أصبحت منك في نعمة وعافية وستر، فأتمم نعمتك علي وعافيتك وسترك في الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم إني أصبحت منك في نعمة وعافية وستر، فأتمم نعمتك علي وعافيتك وسترك في الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم إني أصبحت منك في نعمة وعافية وستر، فأتمم نعمتك علي وعافيتك وسترك في الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم إني أصبحت أشهدك وأشهد حملة عرشك وملائكتك وجميع خلقك أنك أنت الله لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك، وأن سيدنا محمدا عبدك ورسولك. اللهم إني أصبحت أشهدك وأشهد حملة عرشك وملائكتك وجميع خلقك أنك أنت الله لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك، وأن سيدنا محمدا عبدك ورسولك. اللهم إني أصبحت أشهدك وأشهد حملة عرشك وملائكتك وجميع خلقك أنك أنت الله لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك، وأن سيدنا محمدا عبدك ورسولك. اللهم إني أصبحت أشهدك وأشهد حملة عرشك وملائكتك وجميع خلقك أنك أنت الله لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك، وأن سيدنا محمدا عبدك ورسولك. الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيدا. الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيدا. الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيدا. آمنت بالله العظيم وكفرت بالجبت والطاغوت واستمسكت بالعروة الوثقى لا انفصام لها والله سميع عليم. آمنت بالله العظيم وكفرت بالجبت والطاغوت واستمسكت بالعروة الوثقى الله سميع عليم. آمنت بالله العظيم وكفرت بالجبت والطاغوت واستمسكت بالعروة الوثقى لا انفصام لها والله سميع عليم. رضيت بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم نبيا ورسولا. رضيت بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا وبسيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم نبيا ورسولا. رضيت بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم نبيا ورسولا. حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم. حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم. حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم. حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم. حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم. حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم. حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. 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 اللهم إني أسألك من فجاءة الخير وأعوذ بك من فجاءة الشر. اللهم أنت ربي لا إله إلا أنت خلقتني وأنا عبدك وأنا على عهدك ووعدك ما استطعت. أعوذ بك من شر ما صنعت. أبوء لك بنعمتك علي وأبوء بذنبي فاغفر لي فإنه لا يغفر الذنوب إلا أنت. اللهم أنت ربي لا إله إلا أنت عليك توكلت وأنت رب العرش العظيم. ما شاء الله كان وما لم يشأ لم يكن ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. أعلم أن الله على كل شيء قدير وأن الله قد أحاط بكل شيء علما. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من شر نفسي ومن شر كل دابة أنت آخذ بناصيتها إن ربي على صراط مستقيم. يا حي يا قيوم برحمتك أستغيث ومن عذابك أستجير. أصلح لي شأني كله ولا تكلني إلى نفسي ولا إلى أحد من خلقك طرفة عين. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من الهم والحزن وأعوذ بك من العجز والكسل وأعوذ بك من الجبن والبخل وأعوذ بك من غلبة الدين وقهر الرجال. اللهم إني أسألك العافية في الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم إني أسألك العفو والعافية والمعافاة الدائمة في ديني ودنياي وأهلي ومالي. اللهم استر عوراتي ومن روعاتي. اللهم احفظني من بين يدي ومن خلفي وعن يميني وعن شمالي ومن فوقي وأعوذ بعظمتك أن أغتال من تحتي. اللهم أنت خلقتني وأنت تهديني وأنت تطعمني وأنت تسقيني وأنت تميتني وأنت تحييني وأنت على كل شيء قدير. أصبحنا على فطرة الإسلام وعلى كلمة الإخلاص وعلى دين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم وعلى ملة أبينا إبراهيم حنيفا مسلما وما كان من المشركين. اللهم بك أصبحنا وبك أمسينا وبك نحيا وبك نموت وعليك نتوكل وإليك النشور. أصبحنا وأصبح الملك لله والحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم إني أسألك خير هذا اليوم، فتحه ونصره ونوره وبركته وهداه. اللهم إني أسألك خير هذا اليوم وخير ما فيه وخير ما قبله وخير ما بعده، وأعوذ بك من شر هذا اليوم وشر ما فيه شر ما قبله وشر ما بعده. اللهم ما أصبح بي من نعمة أو بأحد من خلقك فمنك وحدك لا شريك لك، فلك الحمد ولك الشكر على ذلك. سبحان الله وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله العظيم وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله العظيم وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله العظيم وبحمده عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته. سبحان الله عدد ما خلق في السماء. سبحان الله عدد ما خلق في الأرض. سبحان الله عدد ما بين ذلك. سبحان الله عدد ما هو خالق. الحمد لله عدد ما خلق في السماء. الحمد لله عدد ما خلق في الأرض. الحمد لله عدد ما بين ذلك. الحمد لله عدد ما هو خالق. لا إله إلا الله عدد ما خلق في السماء. لا إله إلا الله عدد ما خلق في الأرض. لا إله إلا الله عدد ما بين ذلك. لا إله إلا الله عدد ما هو خالق. الله أكبر عدد ما خلق في السماء. الله أكبر عدد ما خلق في الأرض. الله أكبر عدد ما بين ذلك. الله أكبر عدد ما هو خالق. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عدد ما خلق في السماء. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عدد ما خلق في الأرض. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عدد ما بين ذلك. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم عدد ما هو خالق. لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، له الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت وهو على كل شيء قدير عدد كل ذرة ألف مرة. لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، له الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت قدير عدد كل ذرة ألف مرة. لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، له الملك وله الحمد يحيي ويميت وهو على كل شيء قدير عدد كل ذرة ألف مرة. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد مفتاح باب رحمة الله عدد ما في علم الله، صلاة وسلاما دائمين بدوام ملك الله، وعلى آله وصحبه عدد كل ذرة ألف مرة. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد مفتاح باب رحمة الله عدد ما في علم الله، صلاة وسلاما دائمين بدوام ملك الله، وعلى آله وصحبه عدد كل ذرة ألف مرة. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد مفتاح باب رحمة الله عدد ما في علم الله صلاة وسلام دائمين بدوام ملك الله وعلى آله وصحبه عدد كل ذرة ألف مرة في كل لحظة أبدا عدد فوقي ورضا نفسي وزنة عرشي ومداد كلماتي. بكثر مثلاتهم وإضافة سنتهم إلى جههم وينفعنا بهم ويرضينا من بركاتهم وأنواع من نفعتهم. وإلى حضرة النبي سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وصحبه وسلم. الفاتحة. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نستغفر الله نسألك الجنة ونعوذ بك من النار. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا كريم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وتابعين لهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وعلينا معهم وفيهم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. To proceed, inshallah, we are going to continue our lesson. We resumed the lesson after some travel in the weekend prior to the beginning of Ramadan. Over 2 days, we covered the chapter on fasting from the Risala al-Jamia, the comprehensive treatise of Al-Habib Ahmed bin Zayn al-Habashi. So that brings us to the chapter of Zakat. We'll be continuing, insha'Allah ta'ala, in Ramadan, this lesson, at least the first few Saturdays. In the last 10, we'll see if there might be different readings at this time, inshallah. So we intend to learn and teach nawayna at-ta'alluma wa-ta'lim wa-tadhkir wal-mudhakara. We intend to remind others and ourselves, remember. وَالنَّفَى وَالْإِنْتِفَاء وَالْإِفَادَة وَالْإِسْتِفَادَة. We intend to give and take benefit and profit from what we take. والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وبسنة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. We intend to encourage adherence to Allah's book, the Sunnah of Allah's Messenger صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير. We intend summoning to guidance, inviting to guidance, and leading to goodness. ابتغاء وجه الله. We intend all of those seeking Allah's countenance. وَمَرْضَاتِهِ وَقُرْبِهِ وَثَوَابِهِ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى, as well as His good pleasure, nearness to Allah and His reward. Subhanahu wa ta'ala, glorious and transcendent is He, exalted is He. We intend with the author, Al-Habib Ahmed bin Zayn al-Habashi, as well as our sheikhs intended, and what Allah knows of good intentions. Alhamdulillah. So Al-Habib Ahmed bin Zayn al-Habashi you all will recall, was born in 1069 after the Hijrah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and died in 1144 or 1145. That corresponds to 1659, dying in 1732 of the Gregorian calendar. He places fasting, he places zakat after fasting. So fasting preceded, and now we're doing zakat. This is an elementary manual. Many times those being taught this might have been children or young people. So fasting is more likely to, they're more likely to have to perform it than zakat. Though a young person can perform zakat if they've inherited money or they have a trust or whatever. Zakat's due on that, as we'll see. So the Habib says, rahimahullah, وَأَمَّا الزَّكَاةُ وَهِيَ رَابِعُ أَرْكَانِ الْإِسْلَامِ. As for zakat, which is the fourth pillar of Islam, we order them this way. It might also be ordered as the third after Shahada and Salat. In some of the hadith, zakat will be mentioned prior to fasting. Sometimes even fasting will be placed after Ramadan, after Hajj. In any case, it's one of the five pillars. So it's ma'lum min ad-din bi-darura. It's undeniably known to be from the religion. Anyone that has any interaction with Muslims and Islam must know that zakat is one of its obligatory integral elements. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he fought those who refused zakat. And he fought them along with apostates. Radiallahu anhu wa ardahu. He said, I'll fight them if they withhold the cord you tie a camel with that they gave to Allah's Messenger, like a really small amount of wealth. They withhold anything they withheld from Allah, they gave to Allah's Messenger. If they withhold it from us, I'll fight them. Radiallahu anhu. Allahu Akbar. Zakat was made obligatory in the second year after the Hijrah, in Sha'ban, as was the fast of Ramadan. It was made obligatory in Sha'ban in the second year of Hijrah. And the first zakat to be made obligatory was actually zakat al-badan, or zakat al-fitr, right? The zakat al-fitr, the zakat is paid upon Eid al-Fitr. That was the first zakat to be obligatory, and then the zakat upon property followed. And again, its obligation initially was in the second year after the Hijrah. As zakat, what is as zakat? As zakah, and it can also be called a sadaqah al-wajibah, obligatory charity, like the verse prescribing or designating the categories of zakat. إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين, to the end of the verse. That calls it sadaqat, but it's mean as sadaqat al-wajiba or al-mafruda, meaning zakat. As zakat. As zakat in Arabic means, from its meanings, are an-nama wa tathir. It means growth and purification. So zakat actually means to grow, to increase. Allah talks about the earth growing, the foliage growing, and Allah says, zakat wa rabat. The earth grew and profited from it, right? Well, it grew and it increased. La ilaha illallah. And then the meaning of purification is clear. Allahu Akbar. That's in language. In the Sharia, zakat, as zakah, ismun lima yukhraju an malin aw badanin bi niyatin la ala wajhin makhsus. Zakat is a name for what is paid on behalf of or due to wealth or persons in a specific manner, right? It's a name for what is paid due to wealth or persons in a specific manner. So you have two categories there of zakat. Zakat on wealth, and that's what we'll be talking about, or at least beginning today. And then zakat on persons, which is zakat al-fitr, which will be a lesson or so forward in the text. Inshallah, all of us will be practicing it at the end, or to be practiced for us in the case of wives and small dependent children. It'll be practiced for us, so it's paid on behalf of bodies, right? The number of persons that you have in your household or under your support and charge. Allahu Akbar. So he says, تجب على المسلم فتجب على المسلم معرفة أنواع الأموال الواجبة فيها. It is obligatory upon every Muslim to know the types of wealth on which it is due. Right, so the various categories of zakat mal. So it's obligatory for every Muslim to know that. Allahu Akbar wa lillahil hamd. So what are the conditions of zakat being obligatory? The conditions of zakah being obligatory are, in summary, 4. Al-Islam. Zakat is due on the wealth of a Muslim. So someone who has wealth, they're wealthy, and they embrace Islam, zakat is not due from them for previous years. It'll start to be calculated from the date of their shahada. They owe zakat a year later if they keep the wealth and it's of a certain amount. Freedom, it's due upon free Muslims, not slaves if there were, and there aren't really slaves anymore. The owner must be specified, specification of the owner. What does this mean? This excludes a category of people or an institution, an endowment that has property. So, for example, were there an endowment, a waqf, for the poor, right? There's a lot of money. There's a bunch of poor people that receive from this money. Zakat isn't doing that. It's not a specific free Muslim owner. And also like a masjid, for example. There are masajid that are very wealthy. The entities are very wealthy due to the Muslims over the centuries endowing properties to those masajid. They don't owe zakat, right? They don't owe zakat. There's not a specific owner there. It's a jiha, as they say. It's an entity or a group. And then certain life. What does this mean? There are scenarios where a fetus can have proper possession. So if there's a death and there's inheritance and there's a fetus, some of the inheritance is saved for that fetus until it is born. But we're not so sure, is it going to be, born alive or not? So during that period of time when we're not certain of the life, we're not calculating zakat upon that child. So basically, every free Muslim, right? Every free Muslim is going to owe zakat. Tajib al-Muslim al-Hur. And La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Muhammad Rasulullah. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وسلم. Allahu Akbar wa lillahi alhamd. So the Muslim must know what type of wealth zakat is obligatory on. And I recently had this issue with one of my daughters who babysits a lot. She said, I think I owe zakat. And it, like more than a year had passed because she'd been saving. I didn't know she was saving. She's been through Risala, but sometimes, you know, understanding the parameters of a question. So we should teach every Muslim, also new Muslims, teach them that when you embrace Islam, if you have savings, mark this date, and inshallah, if your savings are above a certain amount that will be stated in a moment, inshallah ta'ala, you're going to owe zakat a year from this date on that wealth if it stays with you. So every Muslim must know the types of possessions upon it which it is compulsory. These are livestock. Na'am. Livestock. Allahu Akbar. And those are camels, cattle, and goats and sheep. Goats and sheep in Arabic have one name, al-ghanam, right? So al-ibil wal-baqar wal-ghanam. Camels, cows, and goats and sheep. And of a certain amount with pretty limited conditions. So if someone's got a herd, got 30 goats and sheep, you're going to owe zakat. But I doubt anyone listening has that. But anyone who does have cattle is going to owe zakat, a certain amount. La ilaha illallah. And then gold and silver. Okay, gold and silver and modern currencies are zakats paid on them as silver. Trade goods, tijara, and some investments will be included in that. So most of us, where we're going to have zakat, we're going to have zakat on our currency, and our currency, meaning also our bank accounts, debts that are owed to us in currency values, and our investments. Some of our investments will have zakat on. Buried treasure, rikaz, that's pre-Islamic buried treasure. So it's very unlikely that someone will unearth treasure, but if they did, and it's you could tell by the marks on it, some things about it that it predated the Islamic period, and also it has to be like in fallow land, and the person is the owner, first person who gave life to that fallow land and took ownership. So there's pretty narrow conditions, so it's unlikely. Mined gold and silver, it's also due on. And you do have, we have a silver miner or a gold miner that embraces Islam, they'll owe zakat on that if it's of a certain amount. And crops, grain crops and fruits. So how many is that? It's 6. Cattle, currency, trade goods, buried treasure, gold and silver mines, and crops. And those are both grains and fruits, but fruits here means specifically dates and grapes, not other fruits and other crops. In the Shafi'i school, you'll see in the Reliance of the Traveler some different positions, for example, from the Maliki school about other crops, though it's a substantial amount. So people with small household gardens, you're not going to owe zakat on those. You're not going to have enough where you have the nisab. You got a goat or 2, you're not going to owe zakat on that, or 10, you're not going to owe zakat on that. And the last thing, another reason you're not, is there's no zakat on animals other than livestock grazing on, he says, public land, free land. or land that the cost of its grazing is insignificant. So small of a cost, it's inconsequential. So that's another reason why we're not going into cattle there in much detail. Okay, so specifically, we need to know the zakat on our currency. How do we calculate it? And the main thing you should take from this lesson is, what is the nisab? What is the minimum zakatable amount? Because that'll tell you, wow, I'm going to owe zakat because I have that amount. Then you can look into more detail and calculate that. Zakat is an area that is difficult to learn. There are certain areas, they call them min aqabat al-fiqh. They're the hurdles of learning law. And zakat is one of those chapters. There's some subtleties and details, and I just say that not to intimidate anyone following and listening to the lessons, but just to urge everyone to ask questions of people that are more specialized until you learn how you do it in your scenario, because it's an area where people will tend to make mistakes. So you got to be careful. And as we mentioned in the case, one of my daughters had read through these lessons, but then after, it occurred to her a year or so later, wow, I'm going to owe zakat because I've been holding my babysitting money. It's easy to kind of overlook certain scenarios, especially if someone's not specialized. There's some chapters that are like that. Another area that's like that, it's a digression, but it's noteworthy to mention, everyone, is marriage and divorce law, especially divorce and waiting periods. People just yesterday or the day before, we had a scenario where, it's much easier if you learn how to do it right, rather than if you have to try to ask to fix problems later. So make sure you ask about these things, insha'Allah ta'ala, and learning them in summary helps you understand, that you're going to have an obligation that you need to investigate in more detail to understand how to properly accomplish it. So at least take this as that, at least understand that much, and then inshallah ta'ala, hopefully you'll benefit some more too. All right, so he says, moving on, a precondition of the zakat becoming obligatory is the passing of 1 lunar year, which is also a condition for money and trade goods. Another condition is that they reach the nisab. You could also call that the minimum zakatable amount. I believe that's how it's translated in the Reliance of the Traveler. So a lunar year passing over the wealth in your possession is a condition, and the minimum zakatable amount, as he said, the lower limit above which zakat becomes obligatory. Allahu Akbar. Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sallam. Abu Dawud and Al-Bayhaqi narrated with a good chain an isnad that's jayyid. Sometimes scholars use that vocabulary, jayyid, instead of, they don't say sahih, they don't say hasan, they say jayyid. So it will be either be sahih or hasan. They say jayyid. It won't be da'if. ليس عليك شيء حتى يكون 20 دينارا فإذا كانت لك وحال عليها الحول ففيها نصف دينار. So the Prophet ﷺ said, this is speaking about the zakat on gold. You will not owe anything until you have 20 dinars. That's the minimum zakatable amount for gold. If you have that and a lunar year passes over it, then you'll owe a half of a dinar, right? Which is a quarter of a tenth. So here the Prophet ﷺ establishes two conditions. First, the minimum zakatable amount. This happens to be that of gold, which is noteworthy because some people are starting to save precious metals rather than currency, especially when people just print trillions of dollars in currency whenever they feel like it. 84.7 grams of gold is the minimum zakatable amount, though we're going to see in a moment that excludes jewelry. Jewelry is not zakatable in the Shafi'i school, which differs from the Hanafi school. And then a lunar year passes over it, and minimum zakatable amount of silver is 592.9 grams, which is actually 20.914 ounces. Okay, la ilaha illallah. So you have to have those two conditions. The condition of minimum amount and the condition of a lunar year passing over it. Okay, that's talking about gold and silver. Some people may have gold and silver. You have that. If you have more than that amount of either of them, zakat began to be due, or you could say zakat began to be calculated from the point of view of the calendar on the lunar date that you reach that amount. Before you reach that amount, you don't have to start counting days, right? Once you reach that minimum amount, you have to start, your calendar starts. So say someone had, they had, how many ounces did we say? Someone has 30 ounces of silver. It's not jewelry. It's coins. 30 ounces of silver coins. They take Shahada today, which is what? It's Ramadan 4 or 5 today? Ramadan 5? Ramadan 5. Take Shahada. Has 30 ounces of silver. They got to note the date. That will be the lunar calendar date for that amount of silver. For that silver they had. So if that silver remains with them for a year, till Ramadan 5 the next year, they're going to owe zakat. They took that silver and they spent down half of it. So now they only have 15 ounces. And the other 15 ounces they bought clothing with, for example. The calendar stops. We stop counting. They're not going to owe zakat. Till what the saved currency, which is gold or silver, or our modern currencies, goes above that minimum zakatable amount again. La ilaha illallah. So then what is the minimum zakatable amount in dollars? To make life more easy. All right, what is the minimum zakatable amount in dollars today? Okay, so if this is accurate, price of silver right now, and I'm going to just do grams, so there's less decimal points, it's 84 cents a gram. So 592.9 grams of silver is the minimum zakatable amount of silver, times 84 cents is what? $498.04. So let's say someone has $499 or $498.10 savings right now. If make it easier, $500 in their savings account or in their wallet, $500. They take Shahada today. Boom, we start calculating. In a year, they're going to owe zakat on that if it stays with them. Someone who gets a paycheck after spending everything, they save $500, put it in their bank. That $500 sits there for a year. They're going to owe zakat on that $500. How much? That's coming. But right now, understand that. There's two things. What's the minimum zakatable amount? It's calculated against the silver value, the value of our currency in silver, right? 592.9 grams worth of silver. How much does that equal in currency? That's your minimum zakatable amount. If that remains for a year, zakat will be due upon it, and the amount that will be due is coming. All right, so that's how you calculate it for your currency. You do the same thing for another currency you have. If you had, sterling pounds, Canadian dollars, whatever. What's the dollar value of 592.9 grams? That's the minimum zakatable amount. Once that stays with you, that amount stays with you for a year. You start to calculate zakat. Say that amount doesn't stay with you for a year. Say someone had $500 in their bank account on they received or they embraced Islam on Ramadan 5. Shawwal, for Eid, they bought a lot of presents. It dropped down to 200. They saved over the summer, up to the summer, they saved. It came back up to 1,000. They traveled a lot in the summer. It dropped back down to 200. Up, down, up, down, up, down, till the next Ramadan 5 comes and they have $500. But it kept dipping up and down. So the same amount didn't remain with them the whole year. Zakat's not due. Every time it falls below the minimum zakatable amount, the time counting stops, right? The whole is in the yanqati al-whole, right? So what it is that amount remaining with you for that time. Like, the scenario is like you stuck it in your safe, or you stuck it under your mattress. It sat there. Those dollars sat there like that. Or you stuck it in your bank and the balance remained above that the whole time, not if it dipped down. La ilaha illallah. Common question. Okay, somebody's always saving a little more, right? They're saving $500 for every single paycheck. They get paid every 2 weeks. Technically, every 500 has its own whole. So if they wanted to, they could pay zakat a year after they save the first 500. They begin, and every 2 weeks they keep paying, right, on the new amount. That becomes very burdensome from the point of view of calculating. It is permissible to put out zakat early. So the way to do that is at the end of the year, what was your savings? Let's say at the end of the year, the savings was $6,000. And it would be $12,000 at that rate. At the end of the year, they have $12,000. So then they pay zakat on $12,000. 500 of it is due, and the other 11,500 is advance. You can advance zakat up to a year. There's a detail to that, though. The recipients have to remain deserving until the zakat is actually due. So you should inform them if your zakat, some of it's advanced. So like say you paid a poor recipient and then they have this huge inheritance 6 months later. They're no longer no longer eligible. So then the zakat should be reclaimed and distributed to those who are eligible. So that's a detail about giving advance zakat. You want to give it to someone who's going to be still eligible whenever it was in fact due. La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar wa lillahil hamd. So that's a little bit about zakat on currency. So the 3 conditions for zakat on currency, we're going to add one, and you'll understand why in a sec. Minimum zakatable amount, lunar year passing over it at that amount, and that it not be permissible jewelry. So gold and silver jewelry that is permissible, zakat is not owed on it, right? Even if it's sitting in the safe all year, like grandma's necklace, that was inherited, and when might it be worn next? It might be worn next on your at your daughter's wedding. You're only going to pull it out on those rare special occasions, but it remains as jewelry that will be used. Zakat's not due on it in the Shafi school. Permissible jewelry excludes forbidden jewelry, like gold jewelry for a man. It's forbidden. Zakat's due on it. But when it's prepared for permissible use, it's treated like your other belongings. So like this ring is silver. Permissible for a man to wear a silver ring. Zakat's not due on it. God forbid, were I wearing a gold ring, zakat would be due on that. If it breaks and you're not going to fix it, zakat becomes due on it, because now it can no longer be used as jewelry. It's just a lump of silver. So if people have silver coins stored or things like that, especially if that isn't a minimum amount, but that plus your currency, your bank, your savings or your currency is a zakatable amount, zakat has to be paid on those silver coins too. Same gold, like gold coins or whatever, zakat will be due on those. If that plus your other wealth, your other currency takes you above the minimum zakatable amount. All right. La ilaha illallah. So Al-Habib Ahmed bin Zain Al-Habashi, he says, the lower limit becomes obligatory. Okay, now what are trade goods? Amwal at-tijara. So tijara is flipping wealth for profit, right? So merchandise that was purchased with the intention of trade, like someone, they purchase merchandise and vend, or they're a store owner, and so on, restaurant owner, and they're purchasing food for resale. Though that merchandise, zakat is due on it. If it reaches the minimum zakatable amount at the end of the lunar year of trade, right? So if you begin trading all year, you're doing business, buying, selling, buying, selling, buying, selling. At the end of the year, it's a minimum zakatable amount. That merchandise is appraised. When it's appraised, if it's above the minimum zakatable amount, zakat will be due on it, and it's paid on the appraised value. And investments are treated like that. Like someone owns stocks or something like that. It's treated like that. There's a cap on trade. La ilaha illallah. So then he continues and he says, the amount, one detail there, what about people's 401ks? They should pay zakat on those. They should pay zakat on those. You'll find a fatwa on that. You look at Seeker's Guidance. They'll have a good fatwa for that. And the safer way to go is to pay it before you receive it. Pay it, keep paying it. Otherwise, a lump sum will be due at the end of it anyway. Same amount's going to be due at the end of it anyway. And do we say you're obliged to pay now? The safer route is to say, yes, you're obliged to pay now, not when you eventually receive it. Yep.
If say if I had a job and I don't actually receive my 401k for 5 years or so, and I paid the zakat amount on it ahead of time, would it be the same rules as the currency, where the receivers would have to remain? Okay.
No, it's not considered advance. It's considered due now.
Okay.
Yeah. So the question is, someone has a 401k, they're not going to receive the money for 5 years. Is that considered advance zakat? It's not. It's considered due now. It's considered due, and you can't advance zakat 5 years. You can only advance it up to a year. But it's not considered advanced. It's not considered advanced. La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. The amount that has to be paid on money and trade goods is 2.5%. Rubu al-Ushr, quarter of a tenth, 2.5%. On crops and fruits grown by irrigation, the zakat is 5%. If the land is not irrigated, meaning it's just naturally irrigated by rain or whatever, 10%. Allahu Akbar. So that is a little bit about the zakat of wealth. Particularly note the minimum zakatable amount. Note the lunar year. Because if that lunar year passes and you have that amount, you're going to owe zakat at the end of the year. And one should pay it. One should pay it. Wealth does not perish by land or sea except due to withholding zakat. If everyone paid their zakat, there wouldn't be any poor people. Zakat should suffice the poor. However, many neglect zakat or don't calculate it right. Don't pay attention to it. And it is an obligation. It is an obligation and a purification. Alhamdulillah wa shukrulillah ala dhalik. And in the next lesson, we'll cover some more on zakat, inshallah ta'ala, next week. And inshallah, we'll finish zakat fitr before the end of Ramadan. So we know what to do when Eid comes, inshallah, or we've reviewed it, and we can, inshallah, do it in Lutf and Afia. And yes, sir.
If you know you've been over like $500 for a year, but you haven't paid it, should you just estimate how much you had and then pay all of it?
You should calculate as best you can, and if you need to estimate high, you can. It's safer to do that, and what's above is just charity. So the question is, if you know you had over 500 and you didn't, and then you're trying to, but you didn't pay, so you realize you're late. How do you calculate it? It is accounting, so depending on what kind of statements we keep, you might have very accurate records. But if you don't have precise records, estimate a little high, inshallah. Make sure that you're confident you fulfilled the obligation, and anything that's over is just sadaqah, and that's a blessing to give sadaqah. Yes, sir.
Oh, so if you dip below the minimum, you said the clock stops. It doesn't like reset. Okay.
Yeah, it resets. Sure, resets.
Oh, it resets.
Yeah, it resets. Yeah, we stop counting, and then we'll start counting again when it goes back above.
Okay.
Yep. Alhamdulillah. That's a good question. So I said if it dips below the minimum zakat level, we stop. The clock stops. And then the question the student asked was, does it reset? And the answer is it resets. Yes, you reset. Khalas. So say Ramadan 5, they have $500 before in Dhul Hijjah. It drops down to 100. Khalas. We reset the clock. stop it and reset it. Then it rises back up to 500 in Muharram. Then we start counting again from Muharram. So if that 500 remain with them to the following Muharram, they owe zakat at that point. And Allah knows best. Please just say Fatiha, seeking from Allah that He give us sincere, accepted works, beneficial knowledge, good teaching, calling and guidance, that He please the heart of Prophet Muhammad through that the reward of the Fatiha that we recite go to our parents, teachers, sheikhs, anyone we owe rights, and to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallama. Al-Fatiha. Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Place everyone in Allah's care. As we stated yesterday, we will not have our normal Ramadan Roha through this live stream channel or in this physical space. We will have a pre-Maghrib class, inshallah, at the Muslim Center of Detroit. And that will be about an hour before Maghrib, and it will stream through their channel. And hopefully we'll share that stream with you all, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum.